And I understand you got scraped on the barnacles. You could skip. You could but tell us just that part of the story, if you would, again, please.
Yes,
Thank you,
surely.
sir.
Well, when the first torpedo hit the ship, I was reaching for my shaving gear. I thought I was going over to Waikiki and go wading or swimming or something. And it was the, within a few seconds, a second torpedo hit, and the radioman on watch, by the name of Barry, said a collision. We didn't know what was going on, but we soon took a list, and I went up the starboard ladder, and it was crowded. And one of the must have been one of the firemen from below was lowering the battle grating, they called it, and he was soon persuaded otherwise. And we went up to the forecastle, which under the forecastle, which is the bridge under the bridge, and we knew by that time what it was because we could hear all the fire, and they were shooting at us after we were hit by those two torpedoes. There was a third explosion, but it must have been a bomb close by. There was no evidence on the ship, and but I hesitated, and I went up to the next deck up by the captain's cabin quarters, and I went over the side from there, and scraped myself on the way down, slid down to the bilge keel, and jumped into the water from there.
And so you were on the shore side?
On the shore side, right, correct, toward Ford Island.
And so, without knowing the details of the ship, kind of which end of the ship would you be on?
The Ford starboard.
Thank you.
And swam helped the fellow that was a ship service officer. He had the life jacket on, but he didn't know how to swim. He says, they call me, he didn't know my name. I had red hair. He says, Red, he said, you know how to swim? I was already swimming. And I said, I helped him, kind of towed him over to the to the key, and then we motor launched. Took us just a few yards to Fort Island from there.
The water wasn't on fire?
Now, were you feeling
No,
pain from being scraped, or you weren't?
No, not that time.
Okay. Okay, keep talking. This is good.
Yes, and
this is good.
we took cover in a ditch that was being dug for sewer pipes or something. We saw quite a bit of the action from in the harbor there. But
Describe that for us, Warren, please.
yes, and it was they were still shooting, and while we were there, we could hear when the USS Arizona was hit. It sounded like everything was going up. We thought maybe it was the fuel tanks, but after that, there was a flatbed truck came and took us in further in. I figured it would be safer there in Fort Island, and I got cleaned up. Some of the yard workmen handed me some rags because we were covered with fuel oil. Not had plenty of it on us in our clothes, and from there we went. I got word that there was some clean clothes at the ship service So they just handed it out to us. So I got another set of dungarees. Of course, I was in a undressed whites, they call it, when I was first in the water. But from there, they took several musters of the Utah crew. The executive officer showed up. He was in civies. I know he hadn't been on it. He wasn't on the board the ship when it was sunk. The chief engineer was a senior officer, Lieutenant Commander Isquith, and from there after we were mustered several times. They took us to the USS Argonne and for quarters and subs and quarters they call food, and I was 2 nights, had to watch. We found out I was a radioman, third class radioman, so they put me on duty, and that was very memorable. The watches
Yeah, tell us about that watch there before we wrap up. Tell us about the next night.
The first night I had watch in the Radio Shack, and the chief radioman could see I was a bit uneasy. I was beginning to get uncomfortable from the scratches. He says, "You better go below, and turn in and get some rest." So I did just that, and that's when I just turned in, and I heard this commotion, and they had the USS California was the crew was firing on USS Enterprise planes coming in. There were 2 or 3 of them were lost, and the second night I had a radio telephone watch on up near the bridge, and I remember Admiral Calhoun, Commander Service Force, U.S. Navy, was on deck looking things over, and but it was a memorable night, a couple of nights.
And so technically you deserved a Purple Heart, but they didn't pass out.
No, in fact, Tony says, I was said, can you prove those were Japanese barnacles?
Now, before we go, may we just talk about your later life? I just want you to talk about your wife. She's gone now. I don't want to make you cry or anything.
Oh, I won't.
She was just such a wonderful woman. Let's talk about her and your marriage just for a second.
Oh,
it seemed like you were a perfectly paired bunch. Would everyone agree?
She was a great person, and I met through an old shipmate, and his wife belonged to the same church group down in San Mateo. I was working and living in San Francisco. I went down there. She happened to be a hostess of the dance they had that night, the party, and we started dating.
Tell us a little bit more how that came about. Tell us how that happened.
Well, I said, "Are you that Navy nurse I've heard about?" She said, "Yes, I'm afraid so." But we dated for about 6 months before we were.
And when did you know she was the one?
Yeah, she was always outgoing, laughing. I enjoyed that. And I want to, before I want to thank you and Denise for coming.
Well, we enjoyed recording your story, and I should have printed off more copies. But does anybody else want to ask Warren something here while we got him on the hold here?
Warren, how many survivors are left off the Utah?
Four. We just lost one. The fellow that lived up in San Mateo, Jack Vasson. I'll say one thing: our Utah shipmates would do anything for you during the war. They would recognize you, and even if they were working as a yeoman or something somewhere.
Well, you guys were through a lot, and they threw you right back into the war, didn't they?
Yes.
I mean, it wasn't like they sent all the Pearl Harbor survivors home, and you guys did. That's not what happened.
No, that's correct.
You're too valuable. Well, and that's kind of, you're talking about all your qualities. There's a reason why you were on that battleship. That was a big ship, and you had been selected for that. And of course, you weren't selected to start the war with the Japanese, but you were a special man in a special place.
Yeah, they gave us postcards, multiple choice. I am wounded, everything but I'm dead. And I sent it back to the States to my younger sister, and she got it 30 days later.
Wow. And knowing that you had been on one of the main ships.
Yes.
Well, I always say that I thought that you guys looked like an aircraft carrier because you had all those boards, those.
That's correct for bombing.
Like that. And if it did look like an aircraft carrier, it looked like some kind of aircraft, a smaller one or a
yes.
one or something. And when they didn't see those big boys in there, they came right after you. I mean, that's the first torpedoes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Came down.
The Enterprise, number one.
Yes, that's right.
They took it bad. Took it out on Utah.
I believe that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
They came over that hill.
That's
Just
why
they expected to see two flat tops just parked right there at Fort Island.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that was in the Enterprise berth.
Yeah. See, they were marked on the target on their maps. The ones we shot down, we looked at the maps in the pilot's cockpit, and had a big red ball right there at Enterprise. And that's why they really got it.
well, and it was a special
They
ship
got it
before that.
anyway.
Now, were you ever on the ship when they were target bombed?
Oh yes.
So tell us about that.
They had what they call bomb.
Yeah, tell us this. So you understand what we're talking about. They're out in the water and they're bombing his ship with the timbers. But go ahead.
They used water bombs by day, and they put those large timbers on there to protect the old teakwood decks of the old battle wagon, and they used this for everything. By night they used pyrotechnic type, but shot out a flare upon impact to indicate which squadron was made the hit.
Yes. Or would they use paint or just water bombs? And you don't have to paint colors to see who.
Oh, they would take a break and have people go out and mark where the hits.
Now, so when you're in the ship, what did it feel like when they were putting the bombs on top of the ship? Did you feel it pretty good?
Fairly well.
Okay. Yeah. Oh boy. Well, it's a big old ship, and how Jack got banged through there and got them to cut through that hole. Your buddy Jack.
Yeah.
And how all you guys jumped off of that thing with those timbers falling on everybody. I'll never know. But I think there really can't be a prouder ship in the Utah, really, for what all you guys did. So.
We were a predecessor for the guidance from radio.
Oh, exactly. That's another quick story. Tell us that story about what they did with that ship.
Well, they could put the remote control completely without touching a thing on the. Everything was mechanical and with a radio control, predecessor to the drones today.
Exactly. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Warren.
You're welcome,
And,
Don.
So I'll step back, and I cannot wait to sing happy birthday to you.